Hello dear viewers, this time we will look at the synthesis of toxic barium peroxide and how to use it to make oxygen, the gas we breathe. If you want to know how to do that, then stay tuned, preferably from beginning to end without skipping, because that helps our channel a lot. Thanks in advance and have fun watching. Anyone who knows this channel already knows this warning. If you are here for the first time, please skip back and read carefully. Barium and its water-soluble salts are toxic to the human body. When taken orally, acute stomach and intestinal problems occur first. Usually it then continues with an increase in blood pressure, with a reduction in heart rate and muscle cramps. This is often followed by dizziness, loss of reflexes and cardiac arrhythmia. If there is no timely medical help, this ultimately leads to muscle and respiratory paralysis. As little as 1 gram of soluble barium salt can be fatal to an adult. But the chances of survival are not bad at all if you intervene in time. First aid can be given by oral administration of alkali sulfate solution, which binds barium as a polysoluble and non-toxic barium sulfate. In the hospital, any remaining barium can be removed by dialysis. We are doubly lucky with barium peroxide. Not only it's not very water soluble, therefore less toxic. It also readily donates its second oxygen atom, producing a gas that we all need to breathe and live. So let's prepare both. To begin with, we dissolve 10 grams of barium hydroxide octahydrate in 100 ml of distilled water with magnetic stirring. This corresponds to an excess of 2.8 grams but is necessary to achieve a cold saturated solution, since the solubility is very temperature dependent and the substance inevitably contains a certain proportion of insoluble carbonate. In order to keep the formation of even more carbonate as low as possible, the beaker is covered with a watch glass during the dissolving process, which is intended to reduce the possible entry of carbon dioxide. Of course, it also keeps back corrosive splashes. Thereafter, the solution obtained in this way is separated from the undissolved matter by simple gravity filtration. In the next step, the filtrate is again poured into a beaker and mixed with 30 ml of 12% hydrogen peroxide solution while stirring. This corresponds to a multiple access but promotes complete conversion as well as continued stirring for several minutes, although the product largely precipitates directly when mixed. Barium peroxide and water are formed from barium hydroxide and hydrogen peroxide. After stopping the stirring, the precipitate settles out very quickly. We separate it again using a simple filtration. The filter cake is then rinsed twice with distilled water in order to free it from adhering residues of unreacted barium hydroxide solution and excess hydrogen peroxide. The filter paper is then unfolded, the filter cake covered with a second sheet of filter paper and pre-dried between 2 thick layers of paper towels by pressing with fingers and palms. After turning the complete layer, the filter cake is transferred from the first to the second filter paper so that the first sheet can be easily removed from it. We let the mass dry a little on the filter paper so that it can then be transferred more easily and as completely as possible to a petri dish for final drying. After 24 hours of open drying at room temperature, we got a bone-dry crumbly substance, which we then easily crushed into a fine powder. The weight was 4.6 grams, which corresponds to a very satisfactory yield of 83.8% compared to the theoretically achievable amount, taking into account the total amount of barium hydroxide used in excess. Now for the second part of our experiment, the production of oxygen from barium peroxide. To do this, we set up the apparatus shown here, which we use to drain the gas produced and collect it pneumatically underwater in order to be able to identify it properly as oxygen. We place 1 gram of our homemade barium peroxide in the 100 ml Erlenmeyer flask in advance and first added 4 grams of potassium ferricyanide and then 10 ml of distilled water. When the water was added, gas was formed even in the cold, which increased even further when the mixture was subsequently heated. After the onset of gas evolution and before the start of heating, the flask was closed with a single bore stopper into which the angle tube for gas drainage had previously been screwed. The mixture was stirred magnetically to prevent bumping or foaming over. The following redox reaction takes place. Potassium ferricyanide is reduced to barium potassium ferrocyanide, while barium peroxide is oxidized to oxygen. The weakly basic environment causes the peroxide, which otherwise acts as an oxidizing agent, to have a reducing effect here. After the first test tube was filled with gas, it is introduced into the second one. The content of the first glass is discarded since it mainly contains air that was previously in the apparatus. After the second test tube has also filled with gas, it is sealed with a rubber stopper while still underwater and removed from the apparatus. Previously, the first test tube was again filled with water, which is now also displaced again by the gas. Since the barium peroxide was used up before the test tube was fully filled with gas, some water remained in the tube. In order to prevent cold water from destructively rising back into heated equipment, the gas supply line must always be removed from the water before the heat source is switched off. Now the last filled test tube was closed underwater and removed from the apparatus. Residual water that has not been displaced remains in the glass. If a smoldering piece of wood is lowered into the gas-filled test tubes, it will ignite again. This is the classic evidence for elemental oxygen that we have produced here. You can find this and other gas proofs in the video that we link to you in the top left. You can find a collection of our video highlights in the playlist at the top right. We hope you enjoyed this video. Comments and ratings are welcome. Thanks for watching.